So welcome to the second part of our morning session. My name is Barbara Costini, and I am at the University of Uppsala in Sweden. It's my pleasure to welcome Elena Dana Prioteasa from Cluj-Napoca, who is going to talk to us about the Byzantine style in the medieval wall paintings in Transylvania, monuments, artistic trends, and ways of transmission.
Thank you very much. Paintings done in a Byzantine style or paintings showing the strong influence of a Byzantine style have been preserved in Transylvania, which in the Middle Ages was part of the Eastern Hungarian kingdom. The population was ethnically and religiously diverse. The Romanians were in their majority Orthodox, while the Hungarians and Germans or Saxons belonged to the Latin Rite. There were also important differences as regards the economic and social status of these groups, which also manifested in their material achievements and, consequently, in the amount of information that has come down to us. Some members of the Romanian elite, the so-called Nazis, afforded building churches in stone. Some are still standing and fragmentarily preserve their painted decoration. Paintings of a Byzantine style are found mainly in these churches, but also in several Catholic churches that belonged to the Hungarian or German communities. I shall start with a group of paintings in the Orthodox churches, which date from the 14th and 15th centuries. The earliest preserved wall paintings in an Orthodox church in Transylvania date from 1313–1314, but they are done in an extremely rustic style and are in a poor state of conservation, therefore I will not insist on them here. Chronologically, the next paintings of a Byzantine style are in the Church of Hermes Monastery. The dedicator inscription mentions the date of their execution, 1377, and the name of the painter, who was a local. The murals cover the eastern side of the narthex and the intrados of the entry to the naos. The elongated, delicate figures and the emphasis on lines suggest the influence of Gothic painting. Around 1400, there are a group of paintings that have in common several stylistic and iconographic features. These paintings are found in the churches of Ribița, Crișor, Strei-St-Georgiu, and Zlatna. Some of their stylistic traits were carried on into the middle of the second half of the 15th century, as attested by the frescoes of the now ruined church of Rachitova. In the church of St. Nicholas at Ribița, the general program follows the Byzantine canon. The Christological scenes are situated in the upper register, and each of them is given a large space. The compositions are simple and the architectural landscape is poor. The figures are, I would like first to mention that most of these paintings are in a poor state of preservation. Some of them are incompletely uncovered, so one can analyze them just in part. So the figures are monumental, but the poses are stiff and the modeling of the drapery is rather graphic. The contours are strong and the color scheme is reduced to several shades of yellow, ochre, red, and blue. Two types of faces can be identified. Some have large almond-shaped eyes and long arched eyebrows, reminding some of the figures in the church of Lesnovo, those that are attributed to the main artist in the two lower registers of the naos and the the icon of St. Naum from the church of St. Nicholas Bolnichki in Ohrid, and to a certain extent the paintings of Veluce Monastery from 1370. Around 1370, other figures painted in the nave have rounded faces and a stronger shade contrast. Together with the general characteristics of the compositions and figures, they relate the paintings of Ribița to the Paleologan classicism of the first half of the 14th century, as can be seen in monuments such as Cariet Jami, the nave of Decani, the church of St. Demetrius in Peci, and the narthex of the church at Lesnovo. However, the painters of Ribița are obviously less skilled, and closer parallels could probably be found in smaller churches, usually nobiliary foundations in the Balkans. In addition to a certain delay, As compared to the stylistic trends in vogue, the paintings of Ribica also show the influence of Western art, mainly in the use of iconographic formulas and details, such as the Western type of Christ's descent to hell, the Holy Kings of Hungary, certain details in the crucifixion, the Nativity, and the dress of particular saints. The paintings of the Church of the Dormition of the Virgin at Crișor show some iconographic and few stylistic similarities with the paintings of Ribica. I shall speak here only of an important stylistic difference, namely the type of faces with big, almond-shaped eyes, vigorous modeling, and a rather severe expression that reminds the Comnenian but also the Romanesque type of faces. This is a detail from the Dormition of the Virgin. The red, so here I have the paintings from period because they are dated to 1298 and they are considered late example of the Comnenian style that continued into the 13th century. The red proplasma is also characteristic of Romanesque painting, and the exaggerated expression of some faces reminds the excess sentimentalism that is frequently seen in Western scenes depicting the Passion of Christ. The influence of Western art is also visible in the presence of some iconographic topics, such as the scourging of Christ at the column, the Holy Kings of Hungary, and in some dress details. The style and iconography are the result of a symbiosis between Western and Eastern art, and the archaic features of these frescoes, dated to around 1400, is surprising and should be explained by a rather isolated environment that perpetuated old formulas. Closely related to the paintings of Ribica and Crișor are some murals preserved in the Church of the Dormition of the Virgin in Zlatna, probably dating from 1424, and a now repainted votive portrait dating from 1408 in the Church of St. George at Strai St. Georgiu. The traits of the paintings of Ribica, in particular, can be recognized also in a few fragments of frescoes found in the archaeological excavations at the site of the former church of Rakitova. They probably date from the middle or the second half of the 15th century. Aside from these murals, which suggest the persistence in the region of a particular, rather archaic style permeated by Western suggestions, there were also paintings of a relatively good quality executed in a late Paleologan style, which could be seen in the Church of Colț Monastery, the foundation of a powerful ecclesial family. The frescoes were poorly preserved and were painted over, but former studies suggested a dating to the end of the 14th century. Also, the main painter of the Church of St. Nicholas in Densuș, who left his name, Stephen, written in the apse and in the nave, was a representative of a classicist, even if provincial, trend. He decorated a part of the apse and of the triumphal arch, depicting monument figures with rounded, softly modeled faces and a thoughtful expression. Two other artists worked in this church, in which the decorating campaign ended seemingly in an unexpected way in 1443, as one inscription suggests. One of them, obviously less skilled than the above-mentioned Stephen, painted a part of the apse and the two lower registers of saints on the triumphal arch in a graphic, artless style. The third one, who painted the figures on the piers in an even more simplified manner, was a representative of that local trend that we met at Ribica and Crișor. He is also the author of the painting showing a saint with a specifically Western appearance of the Holy Apostle Bartholomew. Let us now turn to the paintings in the medieval Catholic churches, which also date from the 14th and 15th centuries. Some of them are of a higher quality due to the superior financial means of the donors. The murals of Santa Maria Orlea, dated by an inscription to 1311, cover large surfaces of the nave, but their poor preservation prevents detailed analysis. The program includes a Christological, a Mariological, and an eschatological cycle, and naturally does not follow the decoration scheme of a Greek Rite church. The murals have been repeatedly studied, and some scholars have noted stylistic similarities to Serbian paintings, especially to the paintings of Sopocani, the inner narthex, and Gradac. Some iconographic subjects from Santa Maria Orlea, such as the birth of the Virgin, the blessing of the Virgin by the high priest, and the Dormition of the Virgin, also resemble their counterparts in Serbian and Macedonian paintings from the end of the 13th and the first decades of the 14th century. However, the Transylvanian murals have absorbed Italian features, both in their style and iconography, which led to the hypothesis that the painters could have come from southern Dalmatia. Other fragments of wall paintings, also dating from the first decades of the 14th century, but featuring a much stronger Western influence, have been preserved in Transylvania and in other parts of medieval Hungary, as for example in the Reformed Church at Unira and the Chapel of St. Margaret in Săntimbruciuc. The now Reformed Church in Dârlos, a Catholic Saxon church in the Middle Ages, preserves interior paintings that have been recently and partially uncovered. The iconography includes Western subjects and details, and the inscriptions are in Latin, written by a painter of Greek origin, as suggested by their form, for example, St. Antonius instead of Antonius or Temenikos instead of Dominicus. The paintings await detailed stylistic and iconographic analysis, but here I would only like to point to their partial similarity to murals from around 1300 and the first decades of the 14th century from Serbia and Macedonia. The common opinion is that the church was built in the first half of the 15th century, therefore the paintings cannot be dated earlier. In general, they can be related to the Paleologan classicism of the first decades of the 14th century. Although some faces with fleshy lips and nose and the neat drawing are more closely related to physiognomies that we encounter at the end of the 13th century, as for example in the paintings of the Chapel of St. Simeon Nemanja at Sopocani and the Church of St. Nicholas at Prilep. However, the rendering of the faces is quite simple, using brown colors and patches of strokes, brown contours, and patches of strokes of white and a light ochre proplasma, a way of handling that can be seen in many Western murals. If really dating from the 15th century, the paintings show the already mentioned recipe that mixed archaism with Western influences on iconography and style. The artist could have been some Dalmatian pictores Greci or other Greek traveling painters, but such hypotheses have to be verified by further research. As this is an ongoing research, instead of firm answers, I would like to raise several questions. The origins and lines of development of the artistic trends we see in Transylvania are not easy to establish because so many pieces are and will be missing. Some advance can, however, be made by improving the research on each monument and by including comparison material from other backwater regions, where a certain isolation led to the conservation of older artistic trends and where attitudes towards the Latins were adapted to specific local conditions. One issue with regard to the Transylvanian paintings is whether a certain archaism of forms in the Orthodox paintings was locally perpetuated, came from particular regions in the Balkans, or was introduced via Italo-Byzantine paintings, or perhaps all these suppositions are valid. Neither is the place where the Western influence was assimilated easy to determine. Was it integrated locally, or was the mixture adopted as such? What motivated the adoption of Western elements? How much was it a conscious choice, and if so, what could have been the reasons for it? How was the style perceived? How were the models transmitted? And in this respect, what was the weight of local monuments such as Santa Maria Orlea and Dârlos for the painters who worked in Orthodox churches? The final answer to these questions will rarely be reached, but I am confident that some advance can be made even if that will only consist of bringing in more arguments for one or another hypothesis. The other important contribution of such a research is that it will place the Transylvanian paintings on a wider map, particularly in relation to the Balkans, but also to Italy. A map, let us call it, of the marginals, which is difficult to draw because of the paucity of medieval sources at this level, but which is nevertheless important, even defining for the history of our region. Thank you very much.
So our next speaker is Cristina Cojocaru from Bucharest, and she will talk about the decline of Byzantine tradition in Wallachia's religious paintings of early modern times.
Thank you very much. I'm very happy to see that my presentation it's matching very, very well with the first two presentations today. Because I may say I will present you the Romanian case in the same context and with the same problems as in Serbia and in Greece. First of all, I want to make some summary remarks about our historiography and our terms. For the last period of the 17th century, we use in Romania the term of Brancovan style, which is taken from the name of Constantin Brâncoveanu, but this style, despite it was perceived as a national style, it's something like a pan-Balkanic style. It's a Greek painting, post-Byzantine Greek painting, post-Paleolog painting with some features of Oriental Turkish art and also Western art, more Baroque. So for this starting point, I will talk about the decline of Byzantine tradition, which in our culture is seen as this Brancovan style, and installation is of the new style, let's say Western style. This phenomenon was intensive discussed in our culture because I may say we were a little bit upset about the Westernization or the Occidentalization. Because that lead our policy, country policy to the Western countries. So in the early 19th, the Greek were bad. Because they are described like some vampires. The Greek means the phanariots, rulers. They were described like vampires that sucked our fortune, our money, and so on. And after that period, everything goes with Phanariot or Greek art was marginalized. In fact, there are very few studies on 18th century art in Romania, and widespread theory was that after the Brancovan era was a decline period, and after that in the first and second decade of 19th century, there was suddenly appearance of Western art. So some voices like Răzvan Teodorescu, Daniel Barbu, Cornelia Pilat, Eleonora Costescu, scholars from Romania, emphasize that that's not quite true. The Occidentalization, it's a long lasting process that starts in the end of 17th century and continued over the 18th century. But that opinion stays also marginal because our church, Romanian Orthodox Church, it's not very interested in this theory because the westernization of art was made by bishops mainly, by hierarchy of the church. So this does not match nowadays with their opinion. So after this introduction, I will tell you about this iconostasis. It's the iconostasis from the residence of the Romanian Patriarch, and it has some interesting features. You may see the royal icons register, that it's in let's say another style, a different style, that the upper side, we call this type of sculpture and this type of painting Brankovan painting. And for a long time, these are images from the Great Feast icons. And for a long time, there was belief that the royal icons from this iconostasis are from another period. They were dated like 19th century. And the scholars thought so that the iconostasis was made in the first half of 18th century, and after that the new icons were put there instead of the original ones. And last year we made research for an interesting volume we published, and we discovered a lot of new documents and new signs that shows those icons were in fact contemporary with the rest of iconostasis. And it's not the only case, and it's very interesting because it led me to a theory or a conclusion that in the early of 18th century, the westernized art starts to be put in display in front, and all the Brankovan traditional art starts to become marginal. And I will show you in which ways this marginal could be understood. Those icons were attributed to Tihon Filateev Ivanov from Moscow. We have an entire discussion about this signature here. It's a palimpsest inscription, this one, and we made research, extensive research on other icons. This is an icon from Sinaia Monastery, which was one of the richest in 18th century, and we discovered that the donors, rich patrons from the 18th century, the late 17th century and from the 18th century, used to order this kind of Russian icons instead of post-Byzantine icons made by Romanian or Greek painters in the same period. Why? Because they show a new style, this, let's say, pumped faces that try to show like natural, like volumetry of the carnation of the saints. And of course, this is the school of Ushahov, Simon Ushahov, who introduced this in Russian art. And apparently that was quite a sensation in Romanian art of the 18th century, because we found a lot of this kind of iconostasis that has the royal line with other type of Russian icons. So we made the attribution with the same cartouche. This is a icon from Tihon Filateev Ivanov from a Russian collection. That painter was the painter of Tsar, the Kremlin painter, and never came to Romania. But we have other examples. This is the iconostasis from Colțea Church in Bucharest, and has the same donor as the Sinaia Monastery. And the situation is the same. The upper part of the iconostasis is in the traditional fashion, and the lower part is in this new fashion. This is the iconostasis. It's from 1703, and also in this case the icons were thought they are 19th century, from 19th century. This is the upper part, the Great Feasts icon. The third example, another important church in Bucharest, St. Apostles, another important donor from the same family, the Cantacuzino family, from which also Brâncoveanu belonged. And this is an interesting case of a mixture of this new style, because the icons were attributed to a painter, Atanasie, a Romanian painter, that learned to make this new faces, new pumped faces. But yes, but the rest of the composition is in the old fashion, the old key of representation, with all these details, like in Turkish miniature. Another case is from the Stavropoulos monastery, and here we have another signature from Petru, which signs iconographer from Great Russia in Bucharest. And we know that he came in Bucharest and actually worked in Bucharest. It's an interesting case because you see this landscape that it's very unusual for Romanian art in the first half of 18th century. And again, the contrast between the upper level and the lower level. And here we are in the middle of 18th century, when it's supposed that some of our icon painters, so-called zoographos, go in Balkans and even in Venice, and learn how to do a new fashion of icons. This is attributed to Master Grigorie, which signed as Popovici, Papa Toader, or Fruginescu. And those are names, different names, because in that period the modernization of our state involved also the family name for this painters that were, let's say, anonymous before that. So we know that this Master Grigorie was the student of another interesting master, Ioannis, or John Ioan, the painter, who is supposed to come from the Balkans. We don't know if it's Greek or Roman, Macedonian, Romanian, let's say, but it is named chief of a new organization of painters in Bucharest, and also a teacher in Căldărușan Monastery, interesting center of painting near Bucharest. So this case, Grigore Popovici is one of the first painter in Romania that display this kind of new fashion. And as you'll see, you know, in the end of 18th century, the new style is shown even in Great Feasts icons. So it's a transition. And this is in 1802, an entire iconostasis in the new fashion. So they renounced at all at the old Brankovan style, and this is signed by him with the name of Ruginescu. The style is very interesting. Even the Great Feast icons are in the same strategy of representation. This is a mixture of neoclassical and Baroque and a little bit of past Byzantine tradition. This eclectic style that Mr. Tsampouras showed also. But the results are quite remarkable. And meantime, in other places in Romania, so this was the situation in Bucharest, in the capital, or in the main monasteries, the richest monasteries. But in the same time, in villages or in countries like country areas like Oltenia, the old fashion is still preserved. So the previous icons were contemporary with those one, and the gap is huge. This icon, it's nearly 19th century, and it's perfectly Brankovan, let's say. It's not the same quality because those painters were less instructed than their masters from former period. Let's say Constantinos, who was the first painter, Greek painter in Bucharest in late of 17th century, that brought this style, this new style. And further, the style is preserved even in the late of 19th century in marginal places like Transylvania, because the Orthodox from Transylvania were very far from the center in Bucharest, and they still preserve this kind of old fashion. And even in villages, you can see churches with this kind of painting in the middle of 19th century. And yes, and my last example and the most interesting is the Church of Saint Nicholas from Cernica Monastery next to the Bucharest. This is quite a unique case in which the two manners were put together in the same piece. Unfortunately, the iconostasis was destroyed in an earthquake in 1940, but we have the doors, the Dean's doors, and you can imagine that the fashion of it was like in this iconostasis. It's another example, but it's quite the same period, with icon here, the royal icon, and below a panel with another icon. So what is interesting, it's the fact that the older traditional manner is used for this lower panel, and for the main icon, it's the new style. And the mixture is quite amazing. Those are royal icons, and this is the old-fashioned painter. And it's very interesting that the same way of perceiving things, it's preserved even in wall painting is in this church. Those are images from there. Everything is in the new style. When you enter in this space, you have the impression that everything is westernized already. We are in 1850. And I please you I ask you to notice this this entrance, and in the back of the wall is a stair, and in these marginal places, this is the new style. In these marginal places, it still preserve an old-fashioned master. So in the same team of painter work together an old style painter and some maybe 3 or 4 new style painters. So these are images from the sacristy, the vestry, and the stairwell for the pulpit. And in all those hidden places, they put old-fashioned painting. So it's clearly that in the early 19th century, it already become marginal. So it was hidden because it was no more in glory. Thank you for your attention.
Just an announcement. We are streaming now, so you can attend even by your cell phone, following YouTube. And there is a live streaming in the next call. So if you don't feel comfortable, please go to the next call.
Do you have a comment?
Yes.
I can't see it. Oh, you haven't put it?
Yeah, no. Forgot.
When you call the helper, so that we put it in the PowerPoint.
This representation.
No,
I forgot it. Sorry.
Thanks.
No, here.
Yes.
So, as they're fixing the PowerPoint, we, in the meantime, welcome our next speaker, Dr. Ioannis Vitaliotis from the Research Center for Byzantine Archaeology in Athens. At the What do you want? Post-Byzantine, especially. Okay.
Okay, Byzantine and Post Research Center for Byzantine and Post-Byzantine Art of the Academy of Athens. I thank the committee for the acceptance of my communication. So the 3 small monuments we will present our communication. Sorry. Okay.
Shall I read your title? So your title is Late Byzantine and Early Post-Byzantine Painting in a Borderland, considering some frescoes with Slavonic inscriptions in the Peshkopi area, eastern Albania.
Okay. So the 3 small monuments we will present our communication are located in 2 villages near Peshkopi, a small urban center of eastern Albania, east of the Black Trin River. Before the establishment of the actual frontier line, the main urban center for that region used to be Debar in Albania. Yes, Debar. Now in the former Yugoslavian Republic of Macedonia. Debar in the 13th, 14th centuries is inhabited by Orthodox of mixed ethnic origin. Slavic, Albanian, and Romanian. The city was the seat of a diocese subject to the Archbishopric of Ohrid until the reign of Stephen Dragutin, when a Serbian bishop settled there. Between 1276 and 1282. Around 1390, when Debar was occupied by the Turks under Murad I, the episcopal see came again under Ohrid. Between 1444 and 1479, during the existence of the rebel Christian state of George Castriot, Skanderbeg, the whole region was found in the war zone. And this has a special importance for the dating of our monuments. Herebel is situated 2.5 kilometers east of Black Trin River and is now a Muslim village, with the exception of 2 or 3 Christian homes. The village is actually bilingual. They are Albanian Bulgarian speaking. The Church of the Transfiguration of the Savior is a modest single-aced timber roofed basilica. The inscriptions are in Cyrillic alphabet. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, due to the actual state of preservation of the frescoes, because of arbitrary repairs, we are not in position to describe the iconographic program with exactitude. In the apse, the Mother of God is depicted with Christ in a medallion, according to the type commonly known as Blachernitissa. Below, there are 2 concelebrating bishops holding open scrolls. The Annunciation is depicted on the eastern wall. Here you see the Archangel, and holy diacons on the lower parts of the same wall. Here a diacon, and then a part of the representation of the Virgin Mary of the Annunciation. Depictions of other hierarchs are visible on the southern wall of the sanctuary. In the Naos, saints are represented under painted lowered arches. Here a saint and a painted lowered arch. On the next zone there are medallions with busts of saints. Here we see Saint Kyrikos, the child martyr. Almost certainly the upper zone would host a row of Christological scenes, but nothing has been preserved. The depiction of the Blachernitissa, that comes natural from the Church of Blachernes in Constantinople, that type is known since the Byzantine era, is a very common subject for Platitera's position in the apse in the area of the Ohrid Archbishopric, and beyond this, even we find it in Karavena in southwestern Greek Macedonia, even at later times. The architectonic structure of the lower zone, with the full-body depictions of saints placed under painted arches, is a common feature in some late Byzantine fresco decorations from the same territory, as for example in St. Andreas Ursoulis in Kastoria. The plastic values that are mostly visible in the rendering of the Archangel here lead us to consider the frescoes of Herebel as a continuity, albeit simplified, of the local scholarly painting. The latter goes back to the time of the last Christian rulers, that means before 1400. And you see the churches dated from just before the Ottoman occupation of the area, and financed by local donors, Albanian lords of the area, from the Muzaki family. It is possible that more than one painter has worked in the church of Herebel. However, as the frescoes have not been restored, it would be quite risky to say more on this subject. In any case, the paintings of the Phaneromeni church in Kastoria, about 1400, and perhaps even more those of St. Andreas Ursoulis in the same city, about 1430, indicate a closeness of spirit with the main painter of Herebel. I am of the opinion that the frescoes of our monument could be dated in the decades following the Turkish conquest of the area, roughly between 1400 and 1440. Two chapels with frescoes have been preserved in Kërçista e Sipërme, Upper Kërçista, a small remote village in straight line distance less than 6 kilometers away from Herebel. The Church of the Ascension of the Savior, IIIZK-BAS, is a barrel-vaulted single-nave church. Its fresco decoration is maintained in fairly good condition. Broadly, the iconographic program is as follows. In the sanctuary, the Theotokos Blachernitissa again, and the Melismos in the apse, diacons, holy bishops, and the vision of St. Peter of Alexandria, holy bishops, the vision of St. Peter of Alexandria, you know, depictions of Christ with doctrinal and eschatological content on the vault. So we have the Christ, the angel of the Great Council and Pantocrator, and then I suppose that there was a third representation with the Ascension, but nothing has been preserved. An intermediary register with prophets, which is a conceptual extension of the program of the vault. So the Christological cycle on the upper register, you see the Christological cycle, and here too, the upper register, and on the lower register, isolated figures of saints and the daisies. So the daisies on a blind arch on the northern wall, just at the end of the naos and the beginning of the sanctuary. Now the iconostasis cuts the modern iconostasis cuts the composition of the daisies in two parts. The iconographic program at first sight comes as no surprise. The painter uses the established pattern and incorporates a few peculiarities traditionally found in the territory of the Ohrid Archbishopric, of course adapted to the architectural morphology. The fact that the two blind arcades are symmetrically found in each one of the two long halls, so each long hall has two blind arcades. So this feature forces the painter to look for some special solutions to the question of the selections of the scenes. The choice of St. George and St. Demetrius facing each other on the two western arcades seems quite reasonable, and it is not uncommon indeed. And here is a very peculiar feature due to a special veneration for St. Nicholas. So we have a panel with St. Nicholas incorporated in the composition, somehow incorporated in the composition of St. Demetrius. Not only the Theotokos Blachernitissa and the apse, but also the triple representation of Christ on the vault, as well as the peculiar combination of the Ascension with the Holy Face. So we see the Virgin holding the Saint Mandilion, the Holy Face. So all these particularities are iconographic subjects quite common in the territory of the Ohrid Archbishopric. The combination of the Holy Face with the Ascension also occurs in the Church of the Virgin near Pokrates, probably about 1500, but now independently from the Virgin. It's not the Virgin that holds the Holy Face, it's represented on the bottom space of the Ascension, as well as in churches in Veria, in Greek Macedonia. The prominent position of St. Eleutherios, Bishop of Illyricum, may be indicative of a local veneration. His depiction is also found in a prominent place inside the medieval Catholic Church in Baldren, at Baldren in Albania, a decoration that we have attributed to an Orthodox painter of the first half of the 16th century. The inscriptions in the frescoes of the Church of the Saviour in Kerchista Siperme are in Slavonic. However, in the intra in Jerusalem, we found the Greek name of the scene, Vaiophoros, although transcribed in Cyrillic letters, O Vaiophoros. Furthermore, as the words ending in os in vernacular Greek are male, so in vernacular Greek names ending in os normally are male. So the painter used the male article o instead of the proper female in Greek I, eta. This mixed inscription shows, however, that we are in a cultural borderland, an environment with two functional church languages, Slavonic for the Bulgarians and Greek for the Albanians and the Romanians. As a matter of fact, that bilingualism is a quite common feature in Ohrid Archbishopric. The form of the frescoes in Herebel is rendered in Kërçista, in the Savior Church in Kërçista, is rendered the form is rendered simplistically with rigid lines, accentuated contours, and a quite flat design. The artisan painter is a continuator of a popular style provincial art of the late Byzantine period, quite common in Central and Western Balkans. The face of the Repose Mother of God in the Dormitium might be regarded as a realistic element. Perhaps we have to do with an echo of the realism of the Paleologan art combined with the naturalism of the international Gothic style. Let us be reminded that between 1480 and the beginning of the 16th century, the so-called School of Kastoria, or sometimes works of Kastoria, combines the local Paleologan tradition with the international Gothic style. The style of the wall paintings in the Ascension Church in Kërçista implies their dating to the 15th century. Given the turbulent situation in that region during the Castriots rebellion, they should be dated either in the period 1440 or, before the rebellion of Castriot, or in the late 15th century after the restoration of the Ottoman domination. Defining a closer chronological framework is quite difficult. However, the accentuated contours remind us of some naive style frescoes in the area of the Ohrid Archbishopric belonging to the second half of the 15th century. So this doesn't belong to the Ohrid Archbishopric, it's in Grevenai, southwestern Greek Macedonia, but it's very close to the border between the jurisdictions or the jurisdiction of the Ecumenical Patriarchate and the jurisdiction of Ohrid. So this leads me to propose the period between 1480 and 1500 as a probable date for the frescoes of the Saviour's Church in Kërçista. So between the two choices, beginning first half of the 15th century or late 15th century, well, I would quite reluctantly, but anyway, I would tend to propose the second date, end of the 15th century. The chapel of St. Nicholas, Sveti Nikola, is located just outside Kërçista at Siperme, and it preserves only few fragments of its fresco decoration in very poor condition. The sparse surviving epigraphic testimonies are in Slavonic too. The style of the frescoes is quite naive and close to that of the painting of the neighboring church of the Ascension. Consequently, this is a part from a Dormitium, the Virgin. You see the Archangel. Consequently, these frescoes can be dated to the same period. That means towards the end of the 15th century. I think here it's an inscription Sveti Spiridon. You have a saint, a hierarch, and I suppose the inscription continues on the other side of the hierarch. So we have Sveti Spiridon. So our conclusions. Yes, our conclusions. So the dating of the frescoes I have presented might be considered as problematic, although I believe that attributing them to the 15th century cannot be easily disputed. However, there are a few reasons that raise concerns about a more precise dating, apart, of course, from the poor state of the frescoes in two of the three monuments. First, most frescoes and icons in the territory of the Ohrid Archbishopric, dating from the first 100 years after the Turkish conquest, bear no inscription, or even, as it is the case with the Church of the Virgin near Pokrates, where there is actually a dedicatory inscription, no date has been preserved. Another reason that makes a precise dating of the frescoes of Herebel and Kërçista quite uncertain is that in the same territory, a naive style painting coexists with a more savant one in the same territory. Professor Gojko Subotic has rightly observed a renaissance in the church painting in the region in the 5th decade of the 15th century. However, that does not mean that the openly naive style painting, such as we saw in Kerchist or such as we saw here in Dolgets, ceases to exist. Of course, regarding the dating of the frescoes in the area of Peskopi, the period between 1444 and 1480 should be ruled out, as this area of eastern Albania has changed into a war zone. Therefore, they should be dated either before 1444, as we propose for Herebel, or after 1480, as we propose for those of Kerchist. For the latter, we could even extend our chronological scope till the beginning of the 16th century. Allow me to conclude with some more personal thoughts. So it's from Bulgaria. The frescoes we presented here are the only remnants of church painting from an area almost entirely Islamized. When I visited those three monuments near Peskopi, I had the impression that I was following the traces of an almost lost civilization. It is no coincidence that they are preserved in the only two villages keeping the last remnants of Orthodox population in the area. The rapid recovery of ecclesiastical painting in Ohrid and Debar in the decades after the Ottoman conquest should be associated with the hope and will of the Christian population not only to survive but also to grow and prosper. Today, that remnant of Christian culture in an almost exclusively Muslim region marks rather a fin de siècle. I thank you very much.
Dear colleagues, now we invite you to start the discussion, and maybe in order to be more efficient, we would not ask the authors in order they read their papers, but maybe we shall wait for your questions if you think that it is a useful procedure. Should we start like that? Because otherwise I shall have to repeat all the speakers' names and wait for your reaction. So please, if someone is feeling ready to ask questions or to discuss, he or she is welcome. And maybe we shall use the microphone moving around. So in order not to ask everyone to step in front of the audience. Okay, thank you.
Maybe you can also say your name before you ask your question and clearly which speaker is answer.
I'm first in line, probably. My name is Alexandra Kučeković. I'm from Belgrade, Faculty of Fine Arts. I would like to present a question to dear colleague Kristina Kojokaru, and it's a question of personal curiosity, nothing really important. I saw a reproduction of a painter, Grigorije Popović. I would like just to know, is he well researched in Romanian context? Because I'm dealing with a specific painter, Jovan Cetirević-Grabovan, for several years now, and I think that they were collaborating in one point. And of course, Jovan Cetirević-Grabovan went to Romania. There are records, and I think that he actually worked with Grigorije Popović in Roman Cathedral, and I have some issues with the dating of the wall paintings in Roman, current dating of the Roman Cathedral's frescoes, but I've never been there, so I have all the necessary reservations about my remarks. So just a question about Grigorije Popović in Romanian scholarship, is he well researched?
As far as I know, Grigorije Popović hasn't worked in Moldavia, so the name it's not Slavic. He was for sure Romanian. He was born near to Bucharest in a village called Frunzănești, and that's why one of his invented family name is Frujinescu. And he was a son of a priest who was also a painter, the painter Tudor from Frunzănești. And after that he is named Popovici, the son of the priest in our language, but it's with Slavic ending. And also Papa Toader, like the son of Tudor, of Toader. And we know because of an extended research of one priest in Romania in early 20th century, in 1936, I think, is the article, that this Grigorie Popovici, or however you tell him, was with his master, with Ioan, the painter Ioan, in travel in Balkans, and they painted the Lepavina monastery in Croatia. Sorry.
Yes,
okay.
Please,
Yes.
brief questions, brief answers, please.
I would like to congratulate my colleague Theocharis Tsambouras for his subject. There is a problem with the use of the of the term post-Byzantine painting for the later period, but I think that we could accept it, because we could accept it to a certain measure, because the Byzantine style was almost never really abandoned in a certain period, but there is a mixture. So there is a mixture also in the Ionian Islands. There is a mixture even in Crete with Theodore Poulakis in 17th century. So the term post-Byzantine doesn't concern primarily the style, but the culture. I mean, a religious Orthodox art from the period between roughly 15th and even 19th century. So, but in order to distinguish the period that was really an invasion of Western motifs through engravings in the Orthodox art of the Balkans, I would dare to propose perhaps the term late post-Byzantine art, just to make the difference between the post-Byzantine pure, even there is no pure post-Byzantine art, but anyway, that we can call that. I mean, the post-Byzantine art before the invasion of the engravings, and the post-Byzantine art as it has been transformed through the engravings. Anyway, even the term Renaissance, it's a very it was invented in the 18th century, not in the Renaissance period. I mean, every term is a term, it's a conventional term. So, but anyway, it's a subject for discussion. Perhaps it's a subject for a congress. Okay, I think.
Yes, it was a very long comment, but if someone would like to answer, the colleague from...
Well, it's a conventional term, but it always depends on the way you see things. If you see things like originating from the past, you can name this post-Byzantine. But if you just see things from the other side, it's just a prelude to what's happening next. So, and it always struck me like post-Byzantine is characterizing religious art, but we are always forgetting all these other cultural things that are happening at the same time. It's not only painting. It's not always religious paintings. There's always secular painting and objects that are circulating. And it's very, very difficult to use the term post-Byzantine to characterize them. And it's not always Western templates or books that are giving the inspiration to these painters. It's also Islamic painting. It's also other Ottoman things that are seeing that they try to embed to their mansions, to their secular painting, etc. So it's for me it's problematic. Even this late Byzantine, late post-Byzantine, yes. Well,
yes, please, Mark Katic, as far as I see.
For Theoharis Stampouras' question, it's also just out of my personal curiosity. It's connected to the theme that you presented here. Are there any research of the Orthodox painting in Constantinople in Ottoman time, in 18th and 19th century? It's marginal in research, and there is a lot of churches there, and we don't know almost nothing about that. Can you?
We know some things, but not everything, because it's not well researched. But we have some examples that are published, and we can see that they're all interconnected in this period. So yes, it's part of this phase of painting. Also, not only Constantinople, but its environment as well.
I want to make comments to the discussion. In my opinion, the term may be early modern for this kind of art, which is in transition between medieval, late medieval, and something modern. But I'm not really sure. And another comment on your presentation, Mr. Tsampouras. Okay, it's about George from Bucharest, and I know it's a common place in Balkan literature, this collaboration, this strange collaboration between two painters, one from Thessaloniki and another from Romania. I made a repertoire of all painters in Bucharest, and it's just only one name, George. So I suppose it's that one. We have an icon signed by him with his father, and his father was also a painter. It's George, the son of John, the painter. And there are also church in Târgoviște signed by this team, father and son. And the manner, the facture is of the painting is further lower than the painting from Arbanasi. So I suppose the Greek painter was a better one. Yeah. Yes.
Yes, please, Professor Iacoumis.
Thank you very much for the fascinating papers. I got fascinated. The overtone, let's say, was given first by Professor Makulevich.
Yes, I waited for this.
In a way, let's say, described what spontaneously I would call life and afterlife of artworks, in the sense that afterlife, in the sense of afterlife being the reconfigurations of older artworks into newer settings, thereby making a new artwork for a new period, new perceptions. The whole discussion, let's say, that was initiated by Professor Makulevich made me think very carefully of these very wide terms, and I would like to ask an open question to all participants. While the term post-Byzantine may certainly be a convention referring to a period rather than to a single, particular style, I'm equally, in a way, let's say, puzzled with the word Western or Westernized or Occidentalized, in the sense that it shows a certain anxiety of art historians from the Balkans, let's say, to really specify what part of the West, let's say. So my suggestion, and it's an open question really, is that when we are discussing about styles, we should probably be looking into regions rather than periods or any bigger terms that claim more than it could actually be included in a term. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing up the Western part. That was interesting.
who would like to respond?
We can't
Professor
all
Makulevich,
answer
would
at
you
the
like?
same time, though. So anybody would like to comment on that? And I have a sort of question for you about what you worried about. What art was not orthodox would be kind of disposed of, and I thought you could elaborate on
Yes,
that.
I can connect.
Yeah,
This.
please.
Yes, please.
I never used, thank you, Costa. I never used term post-Byzantine. Because it's a very simple reason. I know, we all know today actually that is one ideological term, and that is number one. That means that, you know, if you're studying art history, and I always make the question to my students, do you know what happened after the fall of the Constantinople? They say post-Byzantine. So then, second question, do you know where is the Byzantine Empire in the 16th century, in the poor Byzantine, post-Byzantine period? They say no post-Byzantine Empire in the Constantinople is Sultan. So, do you know to which church you belong? So there are also problems. There. So many problems. Then, second question, what is most important? What's most paid? They say, okay, icons. Really? But what is with all other liturgical equipment? If you go to Benaki Museum, you see all of them in different styles, but not so much in anything that is connected with Byzantine. You have import from Venice, you have Ottoman styles, so many huge problems. So, if you are making new art history, not like a revolution, but really we need, because we know what happened with art history, how art history was created. So now we have to include everything to understand the past, not to construct the past in the sense that we need for our ideological reasons. And that opens us so much questions, one way to the Ottomans, one way to making questions to which civilization Balkans actually belongs. You know, Balkans and parts of and Jerusalem have been the same country for the centuries in the Ottoman Empire. So I prefer much more to speak about the cultural models. And there is one cultural model inside the Ottoman Empire. It is common to all of us. And it has so many sides, but there's a lot of job to be done to understand it better. So that's one.
Thank you. Someone else? We are approaching the end of our first session, so please. More questions, more comments? Or people are hungry maybe already, tired?
I don't know if Professor Vitaliotis wanted to add something because he dated those churches after the... No, he's not listening to me.
Commenting something else.
Yeah.
Shall we close the discussion then, if no one else would like to join?
Well, yeah.
We would like to thank all you for your attention, for the very interesting papers, and sort of outcome of all these papers, all these I mean, is really related to one way or another to the terminology. And it happens so often that we discuss so many things to go back to beginning, how to speak and what is our language. So thank you very much, and please come back after the lunch break at 2:30 in the afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you.